someone who understands how the economy works, how international trade can be helpful or harmful if we don't structure our relationships effectively. The experience I have is, in my view, unique among the Republican contenders currently, and essential. One, to beat President Obama, and number two, to get the country back to its core economic principles.
I just add one point, and that is that I believe, and I know for a fact, that earmarking is a gateway drug to corruption. We saw corruption led by earmarking, and those are just facts. And Senator Santorum and I in the Senate had really very strong disagreements on earmarking. He was an advocate, he was a defender, and he was vociferous in his belief in earmarking and pork barreling on the grounds that it was his job to get money back to his state. Well, if everybody had that attitude, obviously you can see what it has led to in the past. So I respect Senator Santorum, but this business of earmarking, it is how you got Jack Abramoff. Jack Abramoff is a direct result of the system of earmarking and pork barreling, and that's just one small example.
The president's going to make a little news, I think, sometime today with proposals for defense cuts. What are you looking for there, and what would you do differently?
I'll see what his proposals are. The combination of the cuts he had already proposed and the new cuts that came from the debt ceiling deal total about $950 billion over a decade. In my view, that would, well, in the words of Secretary Panetta, be a what's the word? Scenario? Would devastate the military. And his word was it would be a doomsday scenario. That was the word. He said it would be a doomsday scenario to have that happen, and that's what this president is now pursuing. I think it's the wrong course to gut our military. I happen to believe that we have a strong military to prevent war. That a strong military reduces the threat of adventurism by dangerous people. And I know there is waste in the Department of Defense, a lot of it. But I will go after that waste and use it to finance rebuilding an aging Navy, an aging Air Force, to add boots in the ground, and to care for our veterans in the way they deserve to be treated. We've got a lot of veterans coming home, injured both mentally and physically, and we have a responsibility to care for them. So, in my view, a program of massive defense cuts is the wrong course. Now, I'll see what his specifics are. I don't know what his plan will be. We'll study it, and I may have comments. There are certainly some weapons programs that deserve to be passed on, but there are others that need to be expended.
That also means expensive kind of equipment like airplanes and ships. So we want to be very careful about how we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. When the Chief of Staff of the Army came before the Congress and said we had a hollow army back after the Vietnam War, and we cut defense so much that we really put our security in jeopardy. But I support Mitt's. Look at what their proposals are to make a judgment, not snap judgment. Go with people that we respect and admire, and then make a decision on what we think is best.
Governor, our newspaper is the border state newspaper, heavily circulated and read in southern Hampshire. One of my colleagues in the North End always gives credit for that as the largest newspaper in New Hampshire. That paper endorsed a candidate pretty early on. We have not endorsed a candidate yet.
That's why we agreed to meet with you this
morning. Yes, I realize that. We want to endorse a candidate not by default, by definition. And you're right, we do decide late in the state who we're going to vote for. Have to be a resident of the state as well. Why, Governor, should you have our support and endorsement as the candidate for this primary?
is I can get America working again, not just with good jobs, but with the values and principles that drove America to be the most powerful nation in the world, morally, economically, and militarily. This president is turning America into something we wouldn't recognize. He's making America more of a European-style welfare state, with a conviction that government creates jobs, that government's role is to take from some and give to others. My view is the private sector creates jobs, and government's role is to encourage the growth and dynamism of the private sector, so we can put people back to work and see rising incomes again. This president has failed, and I don't believe anyone else on the stage among the Republican contenders has the background and experience in the economy to, one, successfully post up against him and point out when he talks about his great successes in turning the economy around, that in fact, no, everything he did slowed down the economy and made it more difficult to recover. I have the credibility to be able to make that case convincingly to the American people and to get this president out of office. And then I have the experience to know how to get America's economy competitive again. And if we reelect this president, the first person downstairs, I don't know if you heard all the questions downstairs, the first person who asked that question downstairs, he said, look, I'm afraid for America if this man is president for the next 5 years. So am I. I don't know how we will prevent hitting a grease-type wall if this president stays in office. And that's the near term. I'm also concerned 20 years from now. Will we have employers continuing to move offshore, frightened of doing business in this country? And the consequence of a weak economy is lost jobs, but also the inability to protect and defend ourselves. We're at a decision point which will define what America is going to be over the coming century. And I will tell you this. We didn't think, when I say we, my wife and I didn't think we'd do this again. After the last campaign, we said, hey, we gave it a shot. We lost. I bought a home on the beach in California and sat down and wrote a book telling what I believed. And I said, okay, we're done. And then we began watching this president. And my wife came to me and said, you've got to run again. And I argued with her. I can't remember the time, but about 6 months or longer, I said no. And she kept saying yes. Back and forth, and she gets her way, usually. But in this case, she also convinced me that what is unique about my background, having spent 25 years in business, having competed with businesses around the world, I've done business in dozens of countries around the world, that is one that will open me up to attacks and demagoguery. I understand that. It's going to be brutal. This president's going to be just attacking me day in and day out on a personal basis. And that's going to be a challenge. I've been in the business for long enough to know the success rate of starting a business. At least 9 out of 10 will fail. They take that risk, hoping for a great return and success. Every day, people come up to me and say, I feel I'm under attack by this president. The rhetoric and the policy both make you feel that somehow you're not helping America. That the 1% help America, the 99% help America. And I'm running not to protect the 1%. They're doing just fine. I'm running to help the 99% that are in trouble by this president's economy. Who's hurting under President Obama? Not the 1%. The 99% are the ones hurting under President Obama. His policies have hurt the very people I'm in this campaign to try and help.
We have to planes.
At least we get one more question. That's only fair, right? One more.
All right, quickly, it's the easy one. We keep seeing these other Republican candidates rising to the fore as your primary challenger, and their appeal is they're appealing to the true conservatives, and the knock on you is that you're not a true conservative. Tell me, how do you counter that?
Well, here it's easier for me to counter than, let's say, someplace where I'm not terribly well known. People in New Hampshire watched me as governor in a state with a legislature that was 85% Democrat. And in sport, there's something known as degree of difficulty, right? Where the degree of difficulty of leading in Massachusetts is different than leading, let's say, in a state that's overwhelmingly Republican. But they saw that I came to office in Massachusetts facing a $3 billion budget gap. I balanced the budget every year, cut taxes 19 times, empowered our state police to enforce immigration laws, instituted English immersion in our schools as opposed to what do they call it? Bilingual,
Yeah.
not biliteral, bilingual education. Um, and so they see a record which is a solid conservative record. There may be an issue or two they disagree with me on. By the way, also they see I was pro-life. Every action I took in Massachusetts was designed to protect the sanctity of life. They also know that that I was the national leader of standing up for traditional marriage. It's interesting in the campaign to watch my opponents say that somehow I was the reason Massachusetts has same-sex marriage. I've literally heard that now a couple times in debates. You know better. I mean, you saw that I was the one up there holding the rallies, promoting a constitutional amendment in Massachusetts to define marriages between a man and a woman. They can't fool the people of New Hampshire like they can try and fool people elsewhere. So my record speaks loudly for people who are close to having seen me in office. And of course, I also wrote a book and I wrote it. Meaning, I hired a ghostwriter. He worked with me for a weekend or more, taking notes and tape recordings. Then he wrote a first chapter, and then I read it and I said, "This will never do." And I had time on my hands. I'd lost an election, so I wrote it myself. It describes what I believe about the country and about the course forward, and it's a conservative thought piece. Thank you. Good to work with you guys. Looks like they're making us go. Get on the bus.
Great to see you again.
Wheels on the
Really,
bus.
thanks again.
Thunder,
Thank you.
excellent.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. I would love your endorsement.